Ginny stirred, not surprised by the ache in her head. Traveling yesterday and then Dex. Wow, that had been the weirdest dream ever. And that was saying something. She tended to have some pretty crazy dreams. She didn't quite give it a nightmare label because Dex had opened up. She frowned. Had she scripted his confession in addition to making her mom 8? Was Dex actually here? What was dream and what was real? Gini? Her eyes popped open. Dex loomed above her. 13-year-old Dex, not the real she'd been hoping for. I need to wake up from this, she said, and go straight to the shrink without passing go and probably having to shell out way more than $200. Crazy Town had more insanity than usual. His grin was wry. Are you all right? Of course not. I'm 13. Was she? She studied her arm, her hand. They appeared to be the same size as when she last woke up. At least they hadn't made them smaller. She jerked and tried to sit up. Dex helped her. She looked around. The bathroom. The downstairs bathroom, she realized, the one connected to the kitchen. What happened? Isaac, Dex hesitated, looking rueful, somehow got my keys, the ones to my rig. I have some riot gear in there. Ginny gave him a look. Riot gear? For Blue Hills? Seriously? Dex grinned now and shrugged. It came with the job. What else does Isaac have access to? That came with the job? You don't want to know. Anyway, he set off a smoke canister and, well, rescued us. Gini thought about this for a minute. Would the aliens consider his actions panic or something else? That kid is scary, Dex nodded. Possibly more scary than the little green aliens. Dex nodded again. So now what? He's reconnoitering. Please tell me you got your keys back. I got my keys back. That's something. Gini struggled up off the floor, sank onto the commode. Where's Desi? At the moment, she's with the aliens. With the aliens or with the aliens? From what I can tell, she's pretty much with them. I wonder if they know that's not an advantage, Ginny asked wryly. She leaned back, rubbed her face for, like time 1,000. Sighed and met Dex's worried gaze. Please tell me this isn't real. That I'm going to wake up 35 and alienless. I wish I could. He looked thoughtful. And I wish we could get into the Wi-Fi. Why? I'd like to read Van's paper on first contact. She probably plagiarized us. I mean, seriously, who knows how to do it? Well, if they are somehow following it, then maybe we can figure out what they'll do next. Except that Isaac panicked, she pointed out, or overreacted, maybe. She frowned. What do they want? And why here? Dex perched on the edge of the tub and sighed. That's the problem, isn't it? We have no idea what they want, or how they feel about Isaac's rescue. Please tell me he can't get your gun? Dex shook his head. It's in a lockbox that needs a personal code in case someone gets our keys. He did find my helmet and vest. He was quiet for a minute. It's like we fell into a Disney movie. I used to love those things. Did we really used to pretend we had... She stopped. Maybe that's our problem. Maybe we should, I don't know, channel our inner kid. She half grinned. It worked for Picard when he got sent back to Kid World. Can I just point out that in movies and television, the opposition has to follow the script. We're working without a net here. And no matter what our ages may appear to be, we're the adults on the scene with the responsibility for protecting... He stopped. It was hard to make the case for looking out for the kids when they had no idea where either of the actual kids were. Well, we can't just wait for Van and Biff to walk into this, whatever. What if this is the first wave of an invasion or something? What if we're the test subjects? What if the plan is to turn the whole world into kids? And then, I don't know, rule us or eat us or something. Gini shuddered. She'd always been creeped out by humans as food source stories. I don't want to get eaten, Dex. He shifted closer and put a skinny arm around her. I won't let them eat you. For some reason, this reassured her, even though there was no basis for believing him. But she did. She'd believed him implicitly until... She leaned her forehead on his shoulder, memories flooding back at the feel and smell of being close to him again. I wish... She stopped. Because this wasn't the past. It had all happened. Being turned 13 by little green aliens didn't change anything about the past. His arm tightened. Me too. She soaked up the comfort for a moment, took a deep breath, and straightened away from him. We need a plan, one that isn't just about hoping Isaac doesn't make things worse. I'm more afraid he'll make things better, Dex said, his grin a mix of mischief and wry. That would be terribly embarrassing to us both, she agreed. What do we have going for us? Well, Dex said after a long pause, we're not actually 13, at least, not inside. Translation, all they had going for them were their wits. Sobering. They couldn't hide in the bathroom forever, though Gini found that the thought of leaving the bathroom almost took away her ability to stand up. As if he knew it, Dex held out his hand. Everything had taken on a then and now quality. It was if the past shadowed the now, making both feel out of focus. When she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet, the past got sharper for several seconds. She honestly couldn't tell if she wandered into a Star Trek Next Gen episode, or if this were a crazy version of A Christmas Carol, with ghosts of Christmases past littering up the place. You okay? He asked. She nodded, even though she wasn't. Her writer brain assessed her critically for heroine creds, and found her sadly lacking. It's easier to write this stuff than live it, she admitted, managing a wry smile for him. He chuckled, then directed her to stack behind him again. Should we go get your gun? He hesitated. I hate to ramp things up that much, but yeah, we should probably try to get to my rig. He eased the door open, just enough to peer out. He must have felt confident because he widened the gap and slipped out. She followed him, well, because she always had. Smoke lingered in the air, being pulled from the living room, she'd guess, by the open back door. She shivered, wondering how none of them seemed to have been injured by all the shooting. Could the ray guns have been set to stun? A girl could hope. They inched around the big, battered table, both of them careful to avoid the spot that creaked, and approached that open door. Through it, she saw flakes pelting down from the sky again, as if fired from snow cannons. She'd forgotten just how much it could snow. She'd been gone too long. She opened her mouth to ask about the phone, but closed it again. Bet Isaac had it. Much as it galled, the kid had stayed ahead of them. The question was, could he stay ahead of the aliens? As much as she didn't like to think about it, if they could make them younger, who knew what other technology they had available for keeping them in line? And why had they picked making them smaller as their best option? They couldn't have been around that many real kids. Put more than 2 of them in a room and the chaos increased exponentially and quickly. Dex aligned himself against the door frame and took a quick look, just like the dudes on TV. She might have studied his tush and felt her 13-year-old body shiver a little, even though her 35-year-old brain called her a pervert. He eased out the gap and was gone long enough for anxiety to rise, before a thin arm appeared in the opening and beckoned to her. Mimicking him as much as she could, Gini slid out onto the back porch. The snow was deep back here, and more was falling, enough to keep the road closed for who knew how long. The tiny footprints were almost filled in, though the trough from their passage around the porch was still vaguely there. There was a well-trodden path that was visible in summer, one that led toward the trees and the creek they'd been unable not to fall in, pretty much up until they left. There was a soft pitter of something overhead. Gini froze, her gaze tracking up, even though she couldn't see anything through the porch's overhang. Dex glanced back at her, gesturing her to stay against the log wall next to the door. more reluctant than she'd expected. She did as he'd not asked. It was nice to have something at her back, but it quit feeling okay when Dex climbed quietly up on the railing and slowly, so very slowly, lifted himself up so he could peer over the edge of the roof. He gave a yell. It was answered with a sort of screechy squeak. He fell back, landing in the snowbank on his back. Gini ran forward, pausing at the edge of porch, afraid to stay, afraid to go, terrified to look up. There was the outline of a body carved into the deep white snow. His arms began to flail, forming an almost perfect snow angel. Gathering all her courage, Ginny leaned out, tipping her head back, just as a green face eased into view above her. She cried out too, felt herself falling, heard the squeak and a scrambling sound before she went headfirst into the deep drift. It took some flailing for Ginny to get her face clear of the snow or to find which way was up. She managed it just in time to come face to face with Dex. White flakes clung to his clothes and face, the light striking the flakes, turning him into a sparkly vampire until he impatiently wiped his face, then gave his whole body a good shake. "Are you all right?" he asked. Jeannie nodded, rubbed at her own face as the flakes melted into her eyes. She blinked to clear her vision. Then, as one, they turned to look at the cabin. "Is that what you didn't want to tell me about?" she asked, awed. The oval thing, okay, flying saucer, was perched on the peak of the roofline. It was almost a bridge too far, looking up at it. Had they really talked about what this would be like over tall glasses of cold drinks at the cons? Had they hoped for this? Really? Not once had any of them worried about wetting their pants. Not that she'd wet her pants yet, but she was nowhere clear on that either. It was easy to be brave in a bar. One more good scare. A small green, elvish alien scrambled up the snowy roof and vanished around the corner by the chimney. For just a moment, Jeannie felt satisfaction that it was as scared as they were. It didn't last. Something black, a SWAT helmet, Jeannie realized, slowly cleared the roof line from behind the other chimney on the opposite end of the cabin. "Isaac," Dex said with a note of despair, "he never listens." "To be fair," Jeannie pointed out, "even though I don't actually want to be fair, has he ever been told not to go near the flying saucer?" This got her an interesting look. The eyes were totally Sheriff Dex, but the effect, being shot at her out of a 13-year-old face, was diminished by quite a bit. His mouth worked, like he wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't. Just turned back to Isaac and gestured for him to join them. Isaac gestured for them to join him. "It is the higher-ish ground," she pointed out, though not because she wanted to shimmy up onto the snow-covered roof and then plummet back into the snow. Her body might be young, but her brain hadn't done that shimmy for many years. She blinked. Maybe she was a bit punch-drunk. "He's going to start an intergalactic war if he's not careful," Dex said grimly, until his voice broke at the end. He coughed and gave her a wary look. She managed not to react, but felt compelled to point out, "We don't know they are intergalactic." "A galactic war, then," he gritted out. "A war with aliens, not of this earth." If anyone could, it would probably be Isaac. She shivered as the snow started to chill through her makeshift wardrobe. "So, back in the cabin or up on the rooftop?" Dex looked at her, his gaze considering. "I don't suppose you'd go inside and wait for me to go get him." "In books and movies, the characters always get into trouble when they split up," she pointed out. He blinked. "You do realize this isn't a book or a movie, right?" "I mostly realize it." His brows arched. "Come on, Dex. Really, I've gone so far past reality I don't even know what to call it." She stood up because it was that or start freezing to the ground. "My mom is 8. She couldn't bring herself to say it again. "So not happy. There are aliens running around dressed as elves, and I know." Dex's mouth closed again. "Maybe that's how they always dress, whatever. And don't get me started on the babysitting gig I did not sign up for." Crap, they hadn't checked on Daphne in forever. At least she wasn't up on the rooftop. It was at that moment that Daphne chose to stroll out the back door in pajamas, robe, and enormous bunny slippers, cell phone in hand. There's still no Wi-Fi. I can't live like this. Daphne stopped, her gaze turning girl-assessing guy when she noticed Dex, still trying to get clear of the snowdrift. Gini didn't like it that her hackles came up. It wasn't appropriate. Besides, Dex was both too old and too young for Daphne. How many times back in the day had Van told Gini that her crush on Dex was weird, that she should be crushing on older guys who didn't notice her, not Dex who didn't notice her? Girls, Van used to say in her most lofty tone, are more mature than boys, so boys our age are just too young for us. It's like he's 11 or 12 in maturity years. Gini looked at Dex, who wasn't actually 13, and therefore mature enough to recognize that speculative look being cast his way. He tugged at the neck of his jacket, a hunted light appearing in his eyes. He looked to Gini for help, which she didn't actually mind. Gini turned her attention back to Daphne, possibly planning to distract her from Dex. She wasn't entirely sure. Above Daphne's head, though still out of her sight, the side of the flying saucer lowered along the roofline on the side away from Isaac, and Gini blinked twice before completing her identification, a green Santa Claus, though about half the usual size. Was there a usual size for Santa? Came out, stopping near the chimney as if he or it were posing for a kid's picture book. There was a sort of clatter, and one of the little green men carried a battered reindeer out the door and set it by the Santa. Another of them, Gini was too bemused to ID any of them, trotted pulling a sled. It was their old sled, she realized, their Red Rider. The harness, which looked like old rope, had some jingle bells dangling at intervals that were probably supposed to jingle but didn't. Gini knew her jaw dropped. Was pretty sure Dex's did as well because Daphne huffed a high sigh. What at? Dateline. Notes from Isaac's Strategic Planning Notebook. Since no one has seen the real Santa Claus, I'm not sure what to think. What if he is real? I may have jeopardized my chances. Dateline. From Daphne's cell phone sleep monitor. I'm surrounded by subhumans, though the guy is kind of cute. I wonder how old he is. Dateline, Advanced Scouting Party report. Sturz Connects said we were trying to do too much. I fear he is correct.